Ieuan and the Fleece, Part 1. Ieuan. It was Ieuan's 11th birthday. It was the spring equinox, a time when the days grew longer very quickly. Ieuan did not know it, nor even did his mother, for the calendar, although it had been invented, was not in use by common people. They counted the seasons, the months of the moon, and the passing of the years, even though years had no numbers, but specific days were not relevant. Great occasions such as midwinter, or Callan Mai, the beginning of summer, and Callan Gair, the start of winter, were noted and of course celebrated by the whole village. But unless one's birth occurred on one of these great days, birthdays as such passed without notice. People counted their years, if they bothered at all, by the number of seasons. So this would be Ieuan's 12th summer to come. For Ieuan, this year was noted because it was the first that he took duty on watch over the small flock of sheep of the village. It was not a solo duty. His friend Hugh was a little further along the ridge, also watching. Having the two boys set apart gave a range of vision over the flock, and had the boys been allowed to watch together, there was always a chance their attention could be distracted by each other, and the flock not so well guarded. The sun was getting low over the western hills, and Ieuan was thinking that it was late enough in the day to start herding the sheep back toward the village. It would be Hugh's decision as to when, not his, because it was Hugh's second shepherding. Hugh was the son of the village chief or headman, and a year or so older than Ieuan. Hugh raised an alarm to attract Ieuan's attention and pointed towards the village halfway down the hill. The hill on which the sheep grazed had a gentle slope on the west side, where the village sat more than a mile away, just below the place where a spring appeared from the hillside. Further down, the ground was cleared as far as the river, which flowed from the mountains to the northeast. On the far side of the village, a track ran down to the river, which was wide and had an easily crossable ford in all but the wettest times. Beyond the river, the track continued to the south, and the ground rose steeply again, soon becoming thickly wooded. The top of the hill where the boys sat had been cleared of the forest long years before the village was built. On the top of the hill were banks and ditches that had been put up by the people who had lived there 1,000 years before, although neither Ieuan nor Hugh knew it. Ieuan knew the earthworks well. The sheep under his care were as happy to eat the grass in the dry ditches as they were to eat that on the banks, and the ditches gave some shelter from the fierce east wind that blew across the hill. At this time of year it was safer to bring the sheep into the fold for the night, rather than leave them on the hill, even with Shepherd and his dog watching them through the hours of darkness. The wolves were hungry, as was everything else at this time of year, even though the grass had started growing at last after the long winter. The lambs were due to be born soon, starting in a week or two, and the wolf cubs would be born around the same time. Ieuan looked down the hill and saw a stranger following the path toward the village. It wasn't often that a stranger came to the village, and Ieuan was curious who it might be. Travellers were rare, but this one he seemed to recognise. As the figure came closer, Ieuan saw who it was. It was the storyteller, Cadno, who had come to the village every year that Ieuan could remember, telling stories and singing songs before leaving and continuing his travels north. Cadno always came from the south and always left to the north. Ieuan assumed he took a different route on his way south, and that he probably did that at the end of the summer. Ieuan had never asked him. When Cadno was not telling his stories, he spent much of his time with the headman of the village, Brab, where he fulfilled his second function, that of passing on news from the land around, which Brab in turn would pass to the rest of the village after Cadno had left them. Due to his route, news from the north could take a year to reach the village, while news from the south was much newer. Cadno had been following the same path since he was a boy. He had grown up in the very south, across the sea in Lesser Britain, the place we now call Brittany. And at much the same age Ieuan was now, he had become an apprentice to a storyteller and started his travels. From his earliest years, he had wriggled his way to the front of any crowd gathering around a story, and his good memory and quick wits had earned him the apprenticeship.